Calling the meeting.
Welcome, everybody. The work session for Mayor and Alderman. Remind the Alderman that 6
I do that every time. Boom! We're ready to start the work session for April the 26th, 2022. So I want to remind the aldermen that we do have an executive session at 6:30. So keep that in mind with your comments if you don't mind. We're on a pretty tight timeline. So I think Eric's got an announcement, and before he does that, I'm going to ask if there were any citizen comments on items not on the agenda. And I had no speaker cards, but I still want to ask that. And I don't see anybody jumping up. So I'll go ahead and ask Eric to make his announcement.
I just want to make a quick introduction of a new team member that we have with us tonight, Scott Willier, right back here. Scott is our new emergency management coordinator. Scott joins us after a 20-plus year run with the United States Army. His last assignment serving as a director of operations and emergency services, a wide variety of other assignments at home and abroad, and just thrilled to bring him on board in that critical role. So Scott joined us a couple weeks ago, but this is his first Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting. So welcome, Scott. We appreciate you. We appreciate his service already in this new chapter with the City of Franklin. We look forward to having him as part of our team. Welcome, Scott.
Okay, we're into the work session, and we're going to start with the quarterly development activity report. Catherine, welcome.
Good evening, everybody. As you know, my name is Catherine Harrelson, and this is my first time presenting to you all as the Development Services Operations Analyst here at the city. And I will be giving you all a quick presentation on our first quarter development activity. So just some background, this is generated off of monthly reports from our Building and Neighborhood Services Department. What I will be giving you all tonight is a quick snapshot of our first quarter development activity. So this is from January to March. And I will be coming back to you quarterly to be giving more long presentations for the second quarter and the fourth quarter, because that'll be our mid-year update in July and our fiscal year review. And then in the fourth quarter, I will be giving you a full calendar year review of our development activity. So this one's going to be more of like a quick snapshot, and there will be a more in-depth presentation coming to you in a couple of months. So from the first quarter, you can see that next slide, Angie. Oh, thank you. So from our first quarter, you can see development has been pretty consistent. In January to March of 22, we're seeing about 1,400 permits issued, which is only a slight decrease from last year, which was about 1,600. And when you look at new dwelling units, we're seeing a slight increase in single family, a slight increase in multifamily, and a more substantial decrease in townhomes as compared to this time last year. One of the more notable changes is the total valuation. So this is the construction cost value that is provided within the permit. So this is not the fees that we receive, but the value of the construction. And you're seeing about a 36% increase from this time last year. Now, given that we haven't seen really much change in our permits, I would say that that's pretty much chalked up to inflation and our, and construction costs going up. And then this is an outlook from the last 3 calendar years. Again, you can see that our development activity has remained pretty consistent. One-stop applications have stayed pretty consistent between 1,300 and 1,500. Same thing with permit fees collected. We're staying around $2 million. And new dwelling units are also remaining pretty consistent in total construction valuation. So just to wrap this up, our first quarter development valuation is up 36.6% from this time last year. Again, that's pretty much driven by the market. Overall, our development activity has been pretty strong. I mean, we haven't seen a whole lot of changes throughout the pandemic, and we're coming out of the pandemic pretty strong still. And again, a quick reminder that I will be back in a couple of months, and I will have a much lengthier presentation for you all. And one quick reminder, we have a development services page on our website. And so if you would like, you or any members of the public would like any more information, our reports are there. You can see a map of our development activity. So if there's construction going on in the city, you can find it on that map. We update it regularly. And there will also probably be some changes to that page coming soon. So with that, that is the end of my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I would note on the 3-year trend, the 2021 total valuation, the fact that that exceeded what we saw in the full calendar year of 2019 is pretty significant, that we were still coming out of the pandemic and we managed to be at $556 million of construction valuation. The fact that we're over $1 billion in a 2-year period that includes the disruption of the pandemic is really pretty remarkable. If you'd asked me that a year or a year and a half ago, I don't think I would have projected that at all. So that just speaks to the strength of our local economy and the investment that we continue to see.
Any questions? Ready to keep rolling? Okay. Good job, Catherine. Okay, we're going to look at items 2 through 7, which have to do with acknowledgement of progress reports on a number of different annexations: Long Lane, Pratt Lane, Peytonville Road, Henpeck Lane, Old Charlotte Pike, Clovercroft, and Oxford Glen. So, welcome, Amy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The short story is that of all of these plans of services, the city has fulfilled all of their obligations for all of them. So we will have the public hearing on May 24th to announce that and acknowledge it, but there's nothing left for the city to do, and this will be the only report on all of those items. I'm here, I can answer any questions about any specific one if you'd like.
And each one of those will be a public hearing on that meeting.
They will, so I will have to acknowledge each one quickly.
Okay, thank
Acknowledge
you.
that we said we did what we said we were going to do, which is always good.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts.
Just quick.
Yeah.
Have you received any feedback on any of these?
Feedback from
Or-
whom?
Or from any communications from the people submitting for annexation, or has anything surfaced from anyone in the community?
No, nothing has surfaced from anyone in the community. The ones that are doing, there are a couple, I believe, that are associated with development plans, and those are, wait a second, I thought there was one with a development plan. Right, the Hamilton PUD, they're moving forward with a site plan, but no concerns of any kind for any of these.
Perfect. Thank you.
Item 8, Resolution 2022-24, resolution authorizing the city administrator to approve agreements and the use of condemnation if necessary to acquire rights-of-way and easements for Old Peytonville Road and Long Lane Bridge and Connector Project.
Well, we're still ways off on actually being able to start acquisition on all the tracts of land. But generally speaking, what we do is we get approval conceptually to move forward with the design of a construction project. And then we initially will have public meetings with all the residents before we start going out to do acquisition. But we do have to get this box checked so that we can eventually, after we have that public meeting, get board guidance to proceed. We will then do appraisals and then offer at a minimum fair market value. So if those negotiations fail, this authorizes us to move into condemnation. So we try to get this box checked just so it doesn't come up later and delay us in the project.
You typically give us authority to go 10% above an appraised value. We've tweaked this resolution a little bit to go to 15%, and part of that is just because of some of the volatility we're seeing, and we think that will help us have a little more flexibility. 10% is kind of a TDOT standard. This happens to be a local project, so we have a little more latitude, and we think that additional 5% will help us work with that, and we are already starting to work with some key properties right now, and that little extra authority, I think, will help us get some things done there. So that is a little bit different than what you normally see with these significant projects.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric, I just wanted to say thanks to the team. You guys have done a great job of communicating with the parties that are directly impacted by this, as well as meeting with our Frank Alliance of Homeowner Associations and providing them with information. So the greater transparency that we can have as we move forward for this, I think the better.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Item 9, ordinance 2022-06, an ordinance to amend Title 16 of the City of Franklin Municipal Code by adding Section 16-120, honorary street names.
I'll go ahead and touch on this one. This is pretty reflective of what we talked about a few meetings ago in terms of a process to provide for honorary naming. So we look forward to any feedback or guidance you have on that. There is one component that is not included that we talked a little bit about that I'd love to hear any other feedback you have. We talked a little bit about utilizing one of our citizen commissions as sort of a sounding board, if you'd want to route it through them to get some feedback and a recommendation. Ultimately, the board is the decision maker, but if you wanted to do that, I sensed, at least from some of you, that sounded like that might be helpful. I don't have a commission that just jumps off the page at me as a great option, but there are some that might be able to be adopted or that we could look at as a possible option there. I think of the Public Art Commission might be one. I just, historic zoning has a more defined, specific role, so I'm not sure I'd want to do that. And this is a street naming that could happen anywhere in the city. It's not just in the historic district or districts or downtown area. So just want to open that up if you have some thoughts on if that would be helpful to you. We did not incorporate that, but I did sense that there might be some interest there. So,
Alderman Peterson?
I was just going to ask, what committee would you think?
those are off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I think maybe, I don't know. I'm open to what you all think.
Alderman Brown?
I think the biggest thing for me was just people that have enough context to really understand. I mean, there are lots of worthy nominees in this town, and I think we could probably rename every street if we really thought about all the people who contribute. So having people who really have context and history and working knowledge, I think that's the most important part. It's really about being selective and intentional about those names. And so I don't know that there's an existing committee that would have that makeup, and maybe it's just a matter of grabbing 3 to 5 people who we believe really have their finger on the pulse and really understand and have been connected with people in the community to be able to make that. And it's really just looking for guidance and direction to this board of why these names have come to the top versus others. So that's why I would like that group to exist. So.
We could form a group if you'd like. I don't know, with some representation of different ones. I think there is some benefit to not just make it the board going through it. I mean, we could do a combination. We have a development review team at the city that is different departments. We could run through that group and give you at least a staff perspective, then balanced with a citizen group or citizen commission perspective, and then it comes to you with a couple perspectives.
Well, there are not going to be a lot of Connie Clarks,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
obvious.
Yeah.
You say, of course.
We don't know how
Of
many
course.
we'll have.
Okay,
It is something that will probably be rare and special, but also see the benefit of having some other feedback or validation of it.
So you like just maybe respond to the request with maybe 3 to 5 people to evaluate it? Just citizens that might be involved, and then bring some recommendations to the board?
Hopefully with a really in-depth background and resume of why that name will be significant as
Yeah, I
an
think
honorary
whoever
name.
probably submits it would be given that background. If you'll look at the application process, there's some background required, so.
I know you said historic zoning has a specific kind of set, but when I think of when you rename streets, there's some historical significance there. And not to prototype those on the Historic Zoning Commission, but history of the city and the buildings.
Context.
There's a context there of significance, and one that I think maybe, again, probably those on the Arts Commission that have that context as well, but I would, if I were voting on a street name and I had no context of who the individual was, I would like to have someone who has done, like, in light of history of the body of people and things that they've done. It's not in their primary, I guess, directive as Historic Zoning Commission, but you would think the types of analysis and interests would kind of align with them. So, and how many of these are going to get? Like, I mean, maybe it's just an ad hoc committee made up of members of the arts and the historic zoning, and you have a
You
combined,
could kind of piece it
Just do it
together
ad
from
hoc.
your multiple commissions.
Just-
That
yeah.
might be a good idea, and some other folks who have that context too.
Alderman Potts?
Along those same lines, if you just took the chairperson from each of those committees, that would be a quick, I would think it'd be a quick knowledgeable group. If you're the chair of the Historic Commission, you're obviously been elected or appointed by your commission, so.
There may be, I would question that just a little bit, because there may be some committee chairs that maybe don't have a long, deep history in the city of, so I think just a balanced look at it. So, and you got to have passed to be considered, so. Go ahead, Alderman Berger.
Yeah, just want to remind, I know a couple of people said renaming, but we're not actually renaming.
Yeah, these are honorary.
So I want to make sure that that was explained again. It's, the name of the street stays the same, it's an honorary designation. I just make sure that that was said.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Item 10, presentation by respondent and discussion of proposal to develop affordable and workforce housing on the city-owned property located at 403 and 405 Fifth Avenue North, known as the Hill property.
And we'll ask our representatives to come on up, but I'll say a quick couple words of introduction. We put out an RFP earlier this year seeking interested partners in terms of working on the Hill as a redevelopment and a development focused on affordable and workforce housing on that piece of city property. We did receive 2 respondents. One of those respondents, as we were getting ready to do a staff interview and review, decided to withdraw. But we have the respondent that is in front of us tonight, has a long history in the city collectively, individually as organizations, and are forming a collective team to approach this project. And so we're very excited to share that with you tonight. Want to give them an opportunity to talk with you about their perspective and approach to the project. Really, I guess, to think about where this might go from here is we would look for board direction on how to proceed, if you're comfortable proceeding, working with this team. We would likely bring to you a resolution that would authorize staff to work to develop an agreement with this team. I would suggest that we set a 6-month window to develop that agreement.
I've got it on my.
That would have certain milestones, benchmarks, accountabilities between us and the development team, and that ultimately, once we approved that agreement at the end, then would initiate the development process. So I think having a hard end to that negotiating period helps all of us. I'm hopeful it won't take that long, but it might. But it at least gives us kind of a deadline to make sure we bring it to a conclusion and bring it back to you for approval, and then can launch into really moving forward with the project and going into the development process. So that's what we'd like your feedback on at the end of tonight. Any feedback you have that would lead into or contribute to a resolution of the board to authorize us to develop an agreement with this team to move forward into the project. And so that's what we want you thinking about, and any specific guidance. I can maybe come back at the end of this and talk about some of the elements I think we want to see as staff that we make sure gets addressed. But I'll turn it over to the team and give them an opportunity to have the floor and talk to you about their vision for completing this important project. So, take it away.
You want to introduce the team, just to start out with, Derwin?
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you again for having us, and we are definitely looking forward to making this happen if that's what the board allow us to do. You know, I know this is kind of a very unique opportunity for all of us to come together to do this. But I think we all four organizations bring together a lot of experience that we've done this for as home ownership, rental as well, and dealing with multi-million-dollar projects as well. So part of this, what we're going to form, what we want to do is to form the Hill LLC that will consist of Franklin Housing Authority, which is Derwin Jackson, which is me, a Community Housing Partnership, which would be Wayne Weaver, a Habitat for Humanity of Wisdom and Murray County, which is Beckett Moore, and the Hard Bargain Association, which is Derek Solomon. And we would, the four of us, we're going to form this LLC, which you know, once we know that you want us to do this, it won't take us about our attorneys about a day to form this LLC to make it happen. And part of, you know, some of the questions we've been asked is how, really how are we going to make this work? You know, part of it is between us. We're going to form a developer agreement between the four of us. We'll also form an operating agreement between the four of us, so we all know exactly our roles that we're going to play to make this happen. And part of it is knowing that we've all done a lot of this. So part of what we're proposing to do is build 39 homes, townhomes for home ownership, make it affordable, make it, we're going to have some soft seconds on 16 of the units. And that's something that we're going to put in place where we can make sure that happen. And it's going to take some monitoring on our part, and that's something that we continue to discuss. And that'll be part of our operating agreement that we also will share with the city and the board, so they know exactly how we're setting this up, how we're going to be responsible as a group to make this happen. And we're just, we're excited about the opportunity to bring this partnership together to make affordable housing available here in this city. I'm going to let Beckett. Yes.
So I tell you what,
I'm sorry. We go in line. Let me let Wayne. He's going to cover the overview of some of the deed restrictions in the homeowner association and the selection process that we will use for this.
Good evening, everyone. So the proposal or the request from the city did request that there was a deed restriction, and that's something that collectively as organizations we're accustomed to doing, is deed restricting property so that we do, moving into the future and for years to come, maintain the affordable and workforce housing in the community, that they're not just purchased and then sold to investors at 3 years into the future. So the proposal does call for a 50-year deed restriction on each property that's purchased. If the property is sold anytime in the future, that 50-year deed restriction would continue with the next homeowner, so for quite some time into the future. There also would be a homeowners association. We've been doing some extensive work on companies to manage the development, and again, that's something that we're very accustomed to doing, is managing developments that we do build. And so we would have a very tight homeowners association to make sure that the property is maintained and looks phenomenal in the city. And probably the most challenging of all of these items is selection criteria. We do anticipate a huge response for both the 16 affordable and 23 workforce units. So we've been having some conversations around a possible lottery for the workforce units, and then we would also, the criteria would probably defer to number one, being a resident of Williamson County, either working or living presently in Williamson County, so that this development is for our people that have a stake in the county. And additionally, based on need, so there would be some criteria around need, most specifically for the affordable housing units, the need. And then we have had also some discussions regarding a scoring and a point system, and with also some discussions with potential points for employees of the city and the county receiving some sort of favorable points in the lottery for working for the city or the county. And I think I pretty much hit the highlights there. Thank you.
I've got the exciting topic of numbers. So if you all would sort of proceed to the page with full of the little chart of numbers on there, I'll go through those quickly with you. I'm going to go in reverse order. It seems to make more sense if you do it that way. So we've got it's under sources and uses of funds. This is how we're paying for it and how we're raising the funds to do this project. So I'll go with uses first, which is what the money is going to. And obviously, we have several categories: land cost, affordable, and workforce construction and whatnot. We are hoping, as you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, that the land cost would be waived by the city. Therefore, we could more easily provide the affordable market in this area. So we don't have anything currently listed for land cost. Affordable construction and workforce construction, we're estimating at $276 a unit. That's cost to build. Fees, you can imagine what those are with the city of Franklin. You know what those are. Contingency in there of $500,000. Interest on the workforce portion of our loan, which I'll discuss in a minute. Attorney fees, architecture and engineering, and development fees. So we've got a total project cost of about $13.5 million. So, any questions on that side of it? Okay. So how are we going to come up with 13? Yes, sir.
Alderman Barnhill, go ahead.
I was waiting till I, formed my thoughts. Yeah. I don't want to, appear to burst your bubble or anything, but there's never, that I know of, been no cost added in for land cost, correct?
That was an open topic. When we put the RFP out, we put a cost associated with the land, but that's part of what the proposals were to respond to that. So the board will need to decide what their expectation is related to the cost associated with land.
The reason being for that is because the enterprise fund, water and sewer, own a portion of that. That should not be waived. Now, if you want to do the difference between that and the appraised value of it, I think the board, I think I can, or I was, when we were there, I think the board could pretty well probably live with that, and I don't know that for a fact. But there has to be some compensation someplace, and I'm probably not going to be totally agreeable to it coming from general funds, because you're just swapping from one hand to the other. So there probably should be something in there for land cost.
So that's something the board may want to give us some guidance on. If that's your expectation, that's something we can work with the team on. One thought I've had related to that is that could be a cost that we spread over a period of time that is paid out to the city to reimburse water management utility, and any portion you'd expect come to the general fund could also be allocated over some period of time. I won't throw a time frame out, but we could work on that as an option to assist the team, but also bring some payment back to the utility, especially.
And we definitely understood that going into it. We, being nonprofits and charitable organizations, we shoot for the stars and hope to land on the moon. So we're.
I'm fairly charitable.
Okay, great. I'll remember that. We've got a campaign coming up. Anyway, so if you look at the cost.
Part of the
Yes, ma'am.
difference is that the people that belong to the water, or customers of water, are not they are not the same set of people that are just, taxpayers here.
Right.
Because they're definitely just a smaller and different part of that. And those are the enterprise funds that we call, they have to make their own money.
Yeah, the board's been well-schooled in that aspect, that it is a independent business unit. We run it, it's part of the city, but it is an independent utility, so it has to kind of stand on its own. And so when it's owed something or owes something, we really try to look at that to make sure it either pays its way or receives its due, if you will. So that's something for us to
Do
consider.
we know what the division is?
What I remember, it's around 40%, something like that, I think, is owned by the water utility. Now, we did an appraisal several years ago. We can look at that as a benchmark, so something like that.
And we thought about this a lot, talked about this a lot too. So we do have some flexibility in contingency, in developer fees, and also in the range or prices of the homes. So there is some flexibility to adjust for the cost of the land. Looking at the sources of funds, we're looking at 2 loans, and when you see the CITC and the workforce, it's basically sort of a term we sort of use, and one 0% interest for us as charitable nonprofit organizations, and one's about a 3% interest. So those are 2 loans we're talking about. Construction, sales proceeds, that's really the difference between, as Wayne mentioned, there is a silent second on the affordable homes. The workforce homes are a little bit more because they go up to 150% of median earned income. So that difference is what you see there, the difference between those 2 costs of homes all added together. Okay. And the reimbursed fees, which that number may be a little bit different. If you look a couple of pages down, you can see the requests we have from the city. You see the 479, but you also see some of the impact fees and review fees, and we calculated in water and tap fees as a payment to the city, but we were requesting some of the other fees be waived.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
So all of these units will be for sale?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, 16 units are affordable, so that's, it's based on median earned income.
Yeah, percentage,
And then the workforce.
The construction loan sales proceeds, that is the silent second that you're talking about? So the homeowners would have the second mortgage that they would owe it if they ever sold, or that they would pay on as they own it, but then when they sold, it would pay, the sale would pay the second off. Is that how that works?
On the 16 affordable, yes.
On the 16 affordable? Okay.
Yes. So basically, that second mortgage is the difference between, you could say, appraised value or what is sold to at the workforce level versus the affordable level, that difference. So it's about $100,000 difference.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Alderman.
I'm sorry, one more. I'm sorry.
Sure.
The only thing I would say too is on the and I talked to the Franklin Housing Authority's chairman this morning. Aesthetics on this are important as well, facing Franklin Road. So I think, Hillsborough Road. Thank you. It looks wonderful. A lot of attention to the rear of those homes. Please pay attention to the design on the rear of those, even over and above what we may require in our ordinances, because I think that is very important. We want to be proud of. We will be proud of this. This is a huge achievement, but we also want to, as visitors and everyone walk in or come into Franklin, I think the goal needs to be looking at the Hill property and saying, wow, that's fantastic. I'd love to live there. And that is the kind of quality and design I hope we deliver on these, because that's it's important. It's important for the homeowner. To be and so just, I know sometimes our rear requirements for the rear of homes are not as strict as the front. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, we'll do that.
Go ahead.
Couple of quick questions. If somebody purchases it and they want to move out, are they allowed to rent it?
It does have an owner occupancy restriction as
Great.
well in the
Okay.
deed. Yeah.
And is any thought going into kind of the aging population or disabled people who might want to purchase one with bedroom locations and steps?
I believe you were going to speak to that. They will be all ADA compliant.
Yes, it will be ADA compliant. We actually, that was the topic that came up when we had our work session with Eric and, oh, can you not hear me? Oh, okay, I'm like, I am green. I'm getting on, yeah, see the gray. Yes, we actually addressed that. They will be ADA compliant. We'll make sure we have, wheelchair accessibility, make sure the measurements for the doors is correct. And yeah, that we addressed that in our last meeting with the commission and Eric Stuckey. Also, just to address the look of it, you have about 150 years of housing up here in front of you. I don't know if you actually know that or not, but we was on Southern Living Magazine 2015, so I'm quite sure we can come up with a great design. We actually, matter of fact, you know, Franklin Samara and that team just had, on which I can't wait to look at that project that they went out to Georgia recently, and I wanted to take a look at how they did their design, kind of like a West Haven type of look. So, yeah, we'll make sure we look the back and the front. We'll address that concern as well.
Alderman Berger, then Alderman Potts.
You mentioned one thing about restricting it maybe to Williamson County residents. I just want to throw something out there for you to think about. I'm not opposed to that, and I think that's a good idea. But I know a teacher that works here, teaches in our county, brings her child to school in our county. She would probably like to live here.
It is both. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Either work or live in the county.
Okay, great, thanks. I just want to make sure that people are coming here every single day, maybe even a family who do business here, work here, have that opportunity. Thanks.
Go ahead, Alderman Potts.
Thank you, sir. I just had one more of a comment, and then the second is a question. And the first is I was looking at slide number 4 and also slide 5, and I was just seeing how in the center where it's the two L-shaped buildings, and I can see where there's a small park right there. And I'm assuming that maybe it's because of the topography of the land that you couldn't, could you put the park on the opposite side and flip the building so the park was more towards the center?
Hi, my name is Greg Gamble, and
And asking only, Mr. Gamble, asking only because I see how all of the buildings are facing that way, and then they'd have to go around the other two buildings.
absolutely, there are a lot of opportunities in how this site could lay out.
Okay.
This plan has not been shared with staff.
Okay.
We have a long process to go in the site design, master planning piece. So, yeah, we're just at the beginning,
Perfect.
for sure.
All right, thank you very much. And then the question I had was, I wanted to know how the partnership agreed to the 50-year deed rather than maybe a longer deed, as far as the deed restriction went.
That actually was a request that was in the RFP, was for the 50-year. So we
Okay.
did just adhere to what was in the RFP.
Okay, so it was just the
years.
50 then.
And I think that's consistent with some other smaller projects that we've done related to affordable. I think we've seen that as a best practice other places, but we can always ask and have some discussion about other options related to that.
Okay. Just thinking further down the road, would that be something that could be extended if it got, if you hit that 45-year mark to revisit that?
We'd have to look at that.
Okay.
That's, yeah.
And again, it does, with the transfer of ownership, it does start over. So it does start over, yes. So, yeah, it's 50 years. If you sell it, then it does, yeah.
Alderman Brown?
3 quick questions. One, I'll just restate. Alderman Baggett jumped out in front of me on the aesthetics, but I just want to highlight, it's really about, we do put a lot of energy, I don't question the quality that we built, we put a lot of energy into the aesthetics of frontage and all of that. However, the back of that needs to have some special attention, just given it's facing Hillsborough and Bicentennial Park and all of that. Second thing was, on Toussaint, we don't really have any kind of parking or any kind of access to that. Is there any opportunity to put something in this plan that would address some of that, just to try to throw in a little extra? And then the final thing is regarding Hard Bargain Association, in terms of homeowner association, why, if you're part of that agreement, what would you just take this as part of that? I'm trying to give you more work to do, Derek. But under strong leadership, why not just grab another group? So I'm just asking that question of why not just have that be the parent?
Well, and thank you for the great questions, Alderman Brown. Well, we just to answer a portion that is the first portion that we still work directly with Mount Hope Cemetery and their board closely, and so we're going to work out that second interest. Speaking of the rear, anyway, they do have some concerns as far as they always wanted a little bit more security, if you will, for the graveyard, just because some patrons would come and throw trash in the graveyard, walk their dog, leave stuff behind, things of that nature. So we actually worked directly with them, because when we launched this project, there will actually be homeowners there, and they'll be able to help us actually kind of observe the cemetery to help them out, for one. But two, we are going to work with them as well to have like a little parking for Toussaint Cemetery and their cemetery as well, along with accommodating the walkways and some of the sideway improvement, pavers, things of that nature. So there are plans to do that. As far as us and us joining, it's just it just makes sense. When I first started this, I was a little less gray, and my son was in elementary school in Johnson Elementary, and now he's in high school at Renaissance. So for me, it's a love project from my heart that we want to give back to the community. I know we can't control demand, but we can definitely help with supply and adding to the city of Franklin, Williamson County. So we even had some concept, and like you even said, it's early, but we had some concepts that we were even thinking about making it, maybe putting a couple houses along with the townhouses and things of that nature, since we're more house driven and things of that nature. But I know we can work it out. At this point, it's everyone willing to come to the table and make this a great love project for our city and for our people in our community. So, if you ever take half the heart, we need two halves, right? So we're one half. We just ask the other half to come along with us so we can make this beat, right? So I thank y'all.
Alderman Blanton, Vice Mayor.
Good job, Derek. I apologize for being late. I was at a funeral. I don't know what I missed, but I do know that this has been something I've supported since day one. I can remember fighting the battles. It's the gateway to Franklin, and it doesn't need to be up there. Well, there's so many gateways to Franklin. I could name several, but I'm also so encouraged to see the four of you all come together, because when we all come together, it's when we get things done. You all have made such a huge stride in what you already do by yourselves, but there's so much power when you come together as a team. I can remember a meeting at over on Folk Street when we first started talking about this. So I'm very excited. Not to be Debbie Downer, and I do know in a perfect world it'd be great if we'd go, here's the land. But I do think that we have a responsibility to make sure that we take care of the water fund and make sure that that's brought back. But I think there's other ways that we can creatively partner with you. I think we've shown that over the last several years with Kathleen's direction of finding ways to be creative to make these things happen. And I feel quite sure that if we're able to get one project on the ground that is done well, that my hope is that it can be mirrored in other places. And not necessarily with the city being your partner, although we do kind of carry a pail alongside of you. But I'm encouraged. I think the design is something that we do need to pay attention to. I like the idea that it's kind of like a split affordable and workforce. I've had conversations with some lifelong residents who are feeling pushed out, and this is a way for them to stay in. And I think it's great. And as this board continues to grow together and gel, I'm really excited about the creative things that we're all willing to do that have not been status quo. So I'm excited.
I've got one quick question. Say someone buys the home, they live there 7 or 8 years, their life situation changes for whatever, and that home sells, and it sells for significantly greater value than what they paid for it. How is that difference between what they bought it for and what the gain was at the end? Do y'all share in that gain, or how does that work?
So in the case of the affordable homes that have the $100,000 soft second, if you will, or silent second, if you will, that would that would be for the benefit of the LLC. If anything above the $100,000 is to the benefit of the homeowner, subject to the income restrictions. Because you can never, I mean, there will always be forever restricted to the 150% of area median income for the workforce and 80% of area median income for the affordable. So they can only sell it for so much based on those numbers. But yes, it would be for the benefit of the homeowner.
So the workforce, does it work in a similar manner?
Yes. Yes.
Real quick, the benefit of the LLC, so that means the LLC would make some of the gain.
I'm sorry, only on the
Affordable.
The affordable,
Right.
the deed restriction.
So that money, and the LLC is owned by the various entities.
Yes, that's correct.
And that money would then be used, I would think, dispersed into the organizations to be used for
Affordable
additional
housing.
projects.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, just to add a note here with that regard, if you look at the project and you sort of look at the developer's fee, this is truly, as Derek said, a labor of love. We're really truly, our organization's really truly, we're not even covering administrative fees to do this project for the work that we've put in and the work that we'll do over the next couple of years to do this project. So it really is a labor of love to do something really phenomenal for the city.
Okay.
One more.
Oh, go ahead, Clyde, I'm sorry.
If everything went smoothly, what's the time frame for building out, let's say, build out all 39 of them?
I'd like to speak to that if you don't mind. I would like to go off script just a little bit when Derwin called me to ask to help keep them between the goalposts. I was blown away. Each one of these groups could have responded to this RFP by themselves, but they didn't. They all came together. They're all Franklin-based not-for-profits looking to lift each other up, and rising tide certainly lifts all boats. And so this is really exciting for me, but I will say this is not enough. There needs to be more. So in the development timeline, as Eric mentioned, it'll be probably about 6 months to create the agreement. This is the timeline here that was included in the RFP. And it calculated about 28 months from the selection of the winner of the RFP. There are just a few items that may be left out. This is not a greenfield site. Typically with farms, you can skip the environmental phase 1, phase 2. Here we would need to include that phase 1 and phase 2. We're going to have surveying. We're going to have some geotechnical work done. So just the due diligence that we'll have prior to submitting the development plan may be longer than 6 months. My guess is closer to 8. And then there's about 4 months of joint conceptual workshop, planning commission review, board and mayor and alderman review. So this development plan, in my estimation, is going to be a little bit longer. It's probably in more of the 10 to 12 month time frame. And we wouldn't start the construction documents on the site plan until we had board, mayor, and alderman approval of the development plan. Here, the schedule allots about 3 months. That's pretty close. It's typically in the 3 to 4 month process to get the site plan documents submitted and approved. And in conversations with this group, they probably would not start all of the townhomes at the same time day one. It's probably going to be phased. I think they would anticipate somewhere between 10 to 15 sold per year. So to say all units would be sold and occupied after 28 months, it would probably be a little bit longer than that. But we would include that timeline that we would propose in the agreement that we'd be working out with Eric and the administration. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Alderman Barnhill?
Okay, thanks.
So what we'll do is bring back to you at one of your May meetings a resolution authorizing staff to move forward with the negotiation and development of a development agreement with this team. And that'll set that in motion. We'd set up for ourselves about a 6-month time frame to get that done and to you. We'll get it to you when it's done, but it'll be within that 6 months, and then that will start the process. So, and any other feedback you have, I think we heard some things tonight that are very helpful. We talked a little bit about what some of those components would be in that agreement, but I think we got good direction and look forward to bringing something back to you to consider in a few weeks. Thank you all.
How about Resolution 2022-26, a resolution providing a cost of living adjustment to the monthly benefit for retired recipients effective July 2022?
So I'll start with this, but Christine is here to definitely speak to it as well. This is a process we have gone through by practice annually as part of the employee pension that is covered through what we call the closed plan. And these are employees that were hired before 2017. And the board has the opportunity, per the pension documents, to, at its discretion, make adjustments, inflationary adjustments or adjustments to the level of that payout. What we have chosen to do over the last probably 10 to 12 years is to do this annual calculation around this time of year based on inflationary metrics, and then have made it effective July of this year. Kind of coincides with our fiscal year. We have done that consistently. We have even done that in a couple times where we didn't give employees an increase, we gave retirees an inflationary increase. So that has been something we've been pretty faithful on, but it has been your choice on how to do it. We are in a unique circumstance right now with the strong inflationary impacts. And so this put us in a challenging place, honestly. And we looked at what some of the best practices were around how to handle that. And it's pretty typical that pension programs have some form of cap or governor on that so that you don't just have an open-ended obligation that could really harm how fiscally sound your pension fund is if you hit hyperinflationary times. So with that in mind and looking at some benchmarks, and Christine, I'll tell you, there's some that don't provide cost of livings at all. TCRS, who manages this fund and is also our pension provider for the current program for new employees, they have a cap of 3% in place. So what we did in recommending, staff recommended to the pension committee, and the pension committee unanimously recommended to you, that we go at 4.5%. So that is not the straight inflationary calculation, but it is twice what the 5-year average has been. And it is also, as I said, 50% higher than what TCRS uses as their cap. We felt that was a good balance in terms of providing more of an adjustment for our retirees, but also not establishing a norm that it's totally open-ended based on inflationary calculations only. Had we done the calculation we've done in past years, which is pretty much a straight consumer price index calculation, I think that number's just around 6.5%. So this is 2% lower than that calculation, but it is also higher than what our average has been and what we've done in other situations. So I recognize this is unique, but it also identifies what could be a flaw in our, flaw or weakness in our process, in that we could be having sort of an open-ended exposure to the fund. And it is a closed fund, so we're not bringing new people in. It is what it is in terms of membership and the costs associated with it, so we are probably a little more protective because of that. So I recognize this is a little different than what the practice has been. And so we put a lot of thought into this. It is a balancing act. And I think that's our best thinking behind it, but we welcome questions you have and other guidance you have. We would ask you to vote on some guidance on this at our next meeting so that we can get the mechanics in place and make the adjustment by July. Christine is well-informed and studies this closely. If I missed anything or you want to add anything to clarify, please do.
I certainly don't think City Administrator missed anything. That was very comprehensive. just reflective of the times we've been in. Eric referred to a 5-year average, which is the cost of living has been just over 2%. Last year at this time, we compared the March, there's a March Consumer Price Index table. There's lots of those tables, but there's one specific one we've used for a number of years. And last year at this time, we came to the board and asked for a 1.65% increase based off of that calculation. And here we are in such different times. So the uncertainty that we're in, and certainly our protectiveness of the health of this closed plan, as Eric was stating, is why these large pension programs typically either have a cap, there are a number that don't even have cost of living increases, especially ones that are not considered appropriately funded, and that is certainly a different situation than we're in. This is a plan that is in good shape, but it certainly has not admitted any new members in 5 years, and most of the members in the plan did not make employee contributions into the plan. So it's a significant investment by the city and this board, and we know how proud you are to manage it closely. So those are just my comments that we ask for your consideration. We did have a lengthy conversation with our pension committee, and Alderman Barnhill's our chair of that committee, and Mayor Moore's on that committee as well. They perhaps may want to share their thoughts.
If I might, Vice Mayor, I may be quiet, Alderman Barnhill, if you want to make a comment as far as the pension committee. I mean, I think it was a unanimous vote.
Well, I think it was a unanimous vote also. When we looked at it from the safeguards that are in place, and we also looked at it from the fact that what Eric has said, that this is probably twice what the average has been for the last 5 years. It's also 1.5% above what the state was doing. So we thought this was an appropriate 4.5% to give to the to retirees as a cost of living, knowing that inflation is slightly higher or it's up and down, whatever. But we were not chasing inflation necessarily. We were chasing something that we thought was fair to our retirees based upon what we were presented at the committee that afternoon.
And for some of the aldermen that maybe don't know, some of the newer aldermen, that pension committee is made up of myself, Alderman Barnhill. Then there's also representatives from the city. I think fire. You help me remember. Yeah.
There are 2 employees that are elected by the city. HR coordinates elections. And we have 2 employees, and we have 2 citizens, as well as our HR director also is on the committee.
Thanks for filling that in. Vice Mayor, then I'll recognize Alderman Peterson after that.
So for those of you who know me, you know that finances and whatever you're great at is not my gift. That is why I'm not on budget or pension. So, but what I like to think I'm good at is people, and I've had some calls about this, and I did share it with Eric last week. So I don't understand the disparity. I just know that we've got people that have served this city when it was not a big place to be, and they count on that money to live. And when life is more expensive, I think that we've got to do our best to take care of them. So I don't know, and it's not a battle, it's just I would not sleep tonight if I don't take up for people who need taking up for. To me, I mean, I don't know that we need to be at the acme of 8, but I think when we start lowering our opportunities to take care of people who took care of us, I think that's probably not something I'm comfortable with. So while 6.5 is what your calculation said we could do, I would like to get closer to that than 4. And again, I don't even understand what all this means. I'm sorry. I do have a 401k, so I'll have to come ask you about that when it gets to be that time, unless I keel over. But I just think it's our responsibility to take care of our employees, past, present, and future. And we've done a great job. And when we're settling for something less than, we would never ask them to do the same thing to take care of us. So I don't know if there's anybody else who feels that same way, but I feel like I would feel better if we kind of bridge that gap a little bit closer.
Alderman Peters, go ahead if you want.
I was just going to say, I totally understand that. I think it is a balancing act of what we provide to take care of this immediate group of retirees.
Understood.
But managing it well and keeping it sound is what we do for these folks and folks in the future. And having the guidelines that help us project that out and know what it's going to be and plan it so that we can meet those obligations for everyone over the long term is part of what we're balancing here. Because if it's just kind of open to whatever inflation is, then we might always be chasing it. Especially if we get into an extended period of hyperinflation, you'll have other decisions, and the board gets to make the call. But we
That's
just
why I
have,
say what I
but we
say.
just have a practice of what we have done. We're tweaking it some here to have some form of kind of cap on it to help us make sure that we know what the maximum obligation of growth might be. That gives you something to work towards when you're managing the investments and the target there. So
But I always, but
it's all about taking care of both
Oh, and I know
who we
that's
have
where
now
your
and who we're
heart
going to have in
is.
the future. So
But-
I want you to know, we look at it that same way, and both ways are ways of taking care of your people, both the inflationary increase that we have consistently chosen to provide, as well as having kind of sound best practices guidance in the fund, because we got to meet it not just now, but 10, 20, 50 years in the future. So
Understood.
that's what we're working off of.
but I think too, an argument,
Peterson, and I'll recognize you after that, Alderman Bailey.
an argument I would have is that we've done better than we thought we would in certain areas and certain times. And how we move that shell around sometimes might need to be a different stream too. So,
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
How many people are in this group?
Well, I guess the question I might ask back is just how many actives we currently
Yes.
have. I believe we're down, I did look at my actuary report. The last study we had, I know we were down, this is from 12/31/2020. We had 438 actives. And of course, that's gone down because every person who's retired in that group or departed, we've hired them and they've come into the state plan. So we're probably less than 400 active employees, but we have.
Of our current employees, how many
current employees.
retirees are on the system, do you know?
At that
Is that what you're
point,
asking?
at the last study,
wanted
we
to
were
know
at
both.
206, we were at 261 at the last study,
Retirees.
retirees. So, of course, that's, because the plan is closed over time, that active number is going down. And then the group that's
available
vested,
to
that's
be
not
onto it.
actually drawing, that's there. And then once they get to the age of retirement, then the retirees number will just keep on growing.
Well, your active would go down, but your number of retirees might not, because they're gonna roll over into the retiree.
The life
section.
cycle of the
So,
closed
yeah.
plan will end up, eventually, everyone will be retired, drawing benefits, and we won't have any active employees somewhere way down the line.
Okay, well, the other thing is,
Got Alderman Bailey.
Oh,
Go ahead. No,
yeah.
keep going.
thank you. Just one more question. How much money are we thinking that this would be, for a year?
The
We can't
calcu-
do it for a year.
Well, there's a couple of different ways that we looked at it. First of all, we just looked at what would be the cost impact for our next fiscal year,
Yeah.
based off of the March payments that we made. And the 4.5% would be about $312,000 for a 12-month period. And of course, that's an estimate because we'll have some people retire
Sure.
and some people perhaps not be on the program anymore. But there's the impact for the next 12 months, but it also adds to the actuarial impact, which is that future liability that we have of the plan. And we got with our actuaries for an estimate, and the 4.5, because it is so much higher than about the 2% that we've averaged, it will add about $200,000 a year to the actuarial impact of the plan, because the assumption is lower than what the 4.5 would be. So certainly, if a rate was a little bit higher, it would be higher than that estimate. But
So the immediate impact is what?
But-
And then every year thereafter is 200,000.
311,000 is the estimate based off cash over a next 12 months
Got
And
Alderman Baggett and Alderman Hanson.
Not to get into like the pension committee discussion, because I trust the pension committee and their decision on this, but is the plan performed higher because of inflation as well? Or you would expect equities and bonds and such to perform higher as well?
Well, something that was also on this last pension agenda was we asked our actuary for a first look at his next report, because this closed pension plan is on a calendar year valuation period, not fiscal year. So it's always a little bit different than we talk about with you about our budget, which is on a July 1st year. And so he was able to give us a first look. We don't have a full report yet, but we had strong returns for the calendar year that ended 12/31/2021. And so we actually are going to be a little bit better funded. We were at 83% funded end of 2020, and he actually gave us, he's pretty sure about it, but the full report's not out yet, a percentage that's more like about a 90% funded rate, which is your assets versus your total liabilities or projected liabilities for the pension fund. So this is it's a strong pension fund. Of course, this calendar year so far has been rough for the investments. We appreciate the management of TCRS, because they've held their own, and that was something the pension committee gets to hear. We actually had TCRS's investment manager come and explain how he's been able to hold our own. But certainly, we're not seeing returns this year like we did last year. But that valuation period will be ending. It'll be 12/31 again at the end of 2022.
Alderman Hanson? Great. Any other questions or comments? Well, I've sat on that pension committee, I guess, since 2007 or 8, and, we've seen a lot of changes, and we've taken a lot of actions as far as additional money in the plan, worked very, very hard to make sure that it is solvent and try to get that percentage of benefits up in that 90% range. I think the committee takes that fiduciary responsibility very seriously to make sure that money is there. And I think that the 4.5% is certainly not what inflation is, but it's more than many others have done. So, and as I said, as Clyde said, that it was a unanimous vote at that committee, and that included one of our members is a banker, and another one is he's a benefits guy.
HR professional. Yeah,
HR professional. So we've got some really good people on that committee.
And if I could say something, the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System is one of the best funded in the nation. And so that really makes a difference. I think it's interesting. I did not know that they had a 3% top on their increase. I have a retirement with them.
Do you have an interest in that?
And just Alderman Peterson, Mayor doesn't mind, I will say that the state, the TCRS plan looks at the same table that we have been looking at, but they use April. But they do have the 3% cap in place, and so they've already been publicly talking about this for some time, because they do their cost of living increase in July also, and that's also the timing of us being here, is we do ask if there's going for the cost of living increase to let our HR department have the month of June. The plan does require the alderman to approve a cost of living by resolution by one vote, and then to give our HR department the full month of June to get that ready to implement in July. So that's why we're here now.
So we'll be seeing this on the which
May
meeting?
The May 10th.
May 10th. Okay. Okay. Update on the American Rescue Plan Act.
Mike's going to come up and join us. This is something we have been working on and want to give you roughly around a quarterly update. We do file some paperwork with federal government on this, but it continues to evolve. Our focus all along has been to get the federal guidance, which is fairly complex, apply it to our circumstance, and put it into projects and places of impact that we think we get the greatest benefit from. And so that has continued to evolve, and Mike and Christine and Michelle can speak to what we have identified to this point. It's still evolving. There's still dollars that we have to allocate. And some of it, I think we're still exploring exactly what those numbers will look like, but we think we have a pretty good balance of items across the different allowed categories, and we'll walk through as we have it now, and what we spent, what we plan on spending, and give you a sense of where it's headed. So Christine, Mike, take it away.
I may start with an introduction, a background of the American Rescue Plan Act that we're talking about tonight. And we work together to try to keep ourselves straight. So please, any questions you have, we'll be glad to help as well. This American Rescue Plan was passed and signed into law March the 3rd, 2021. That March 3rd date is very important because that's actually when we could start looking at our allowable expenses that would go toward this program. So it began on March the 3rd, 2021. We are required, the City of Franklin has a direct allocation of $9,253,841, and we are required to have these funds obligated by 12/31/2024, and that means under contract. And then we have another 2 years to spend all of the funds, which would be by the end of 2026. So that certainly in the world that our water sewer director, Michelle Hatcher, lives in, that is not that far away. So we are looking at those timelines, and that is, we've been asked, is that going to change? We do not know, but it would take a law of the federal government to change those dates. So that is not something that's even up to the state of Tennessee. That is up to the federal government. We have received half of those funds last May, and we are expecting to receive another $4.6 million by the end of May. Another 35 days or so, we should receive the second tranche of money. And I will turn over to my colleague, Mike Lowe, our comptroller, and he'll describe what we have spent so far in the program.
Good evening. Yes, the federal government, they have a requirement for all recipients to, in essence, to file reports on the monies they've spent. And the deadline for us is this Friday. And what we did on this handout right here is it's actually to show what we've spent the funds on to this point. So on that report, we will actually show that we have done premium pay, which was $1,000 net pay plus taxes. It was also toward COVID-19 leave, as well as the acquisition of battlefield land, which is the Spivey tract. And what that was actually the last of the payments that the city paid toward that tract.
And if I can give just a little bit of background on the COVID-19 leave category, when the board authorized the COVID-19 leave for employees, we actually set up a separate pay code, and our HR department worked with those employees who were diagnosed so we could capture what was the value of the leave time that those employees incurred, and that's what made it eligible for this program to be reimbursed. So this is also employees in our general fund, general services, but also our utility employees or sanitation employees who were affected. We were able to reimburse those funds where those employees worked who incurred the COVID-19 leave from work.
And so those are the funds that we have spent, but we also have put together a list of what's been proposed. So if you look down in 4, 5, and 6, we know there's been a parking counter system for the 2nd and 4th Avenue garages proposed. There's been the eastern flank improvements, which we think will be within fiscal year 22 and 23. And then there's 2 other projects that I think Eric is going to maybe help us with, and Michelle. And the first one I think Eric's going to help us with is a request by the Franklin Housing Authority for water and sewer improvements, as well as Michelle's going to help us on a proposed project the Lewisburg water and sewer improvements.
So the first portion, and I shared a summary background with the board on this, is several Franklin Housing Authority projects. And these are all affordable housing projects. It's actually a total improvement of water and sewer, but primarily sewer, to those projects that total $2 million. And the proposal is to share that cost between the city and county, both using American Rescue Plan dollars. So we'd each pay about $1 million. I've actually gotten some further feedback on that the county's particularly interested in allocating their $1 million towards the Hill project, and then the city would do the other 3 projects. Frankly, I kind of like that because we have some other asks that may be coming our way on the Hill. It'd be nice for the county to have that aspect, and we'll take on some other elements of it as well. Not sure it really matters that much in the big picture, but they were particularly interested in supporting that. There are 3 other somewhat smaller projects that total $1 million in terms of those improvements. Those do specifically help those developments. Those are, as affordable housing, fit the category of disproportionately impacted populations in our community. But it is also checks another box in terms of its water and sewer infrastructure. So it really helps us in a couple places, and appreciate that opportunity to partner and leverage our dollars, not only as federal dollars, but with the county pitching in as well. So that's what that would bring.
Go ahead, Alderman Baggett.
Before we get into more water and sewer, on that, in fact, I think I would prefer on the Hill property as well. It's for ownership, and I know that, can you please look into, so some of the other, I want that to benefit the Franklin Housing Authority on the other ones, and those are also made up of investment groups. Some of those other projects have investment groups, but, in partnership. So I think it's really important for us to make sure that those dollars are directly helping Franklin Housing Authority, obviously their mission, but certainly don't want to look at, if you could just investigate that a little bit more. And I've talked to them a little bit about it, and just to make sure that our $1 million to those other projects are not inadvertently kind of getting back to investment groups and not the Franklin
By
Housing.
definition, it has to go to the water and sewer costs.
But so those groups had to pay for them. I mean, they were obligated to pay for them anyway, and they have some equity in those projects. I guess I just want to make really certain that we're, and I think everyone does.
Okay, right.
And I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
It's not like a loaded question. I don't know the answer, and I know
we have to tie it directly back to project costs. So that's what we will do. I hear what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
I just think there's one question, because I know during some of those others, there was talk of the equity groups that are behind it, and it has to happen to get those done. I get it. And it's not a bad thing.
Right, right.
But as we look at our public COVID money, we'll make sure it is going to benefit.
We want to allocate it to
FHA.
project costs, not some kind of administrator or developer costs.
Administrative cost. Yeah,
I got you.
exactly.
Yep.
Continue on there. Oh, I'm sorry. Going to say continue on.
Okay. So for the Lewisburg Avenue cost, earlier this year, you approved a contract that we have with one of our consultants to look at the water line in this area. So this is from Lewisburg Avenue, kind of from Folks all the way up to Margin, if you remember. And then we're also going to be looking at around the Berry Circle about looping that water line. We're going to be doing some hydraulic improvements in that area. Since then, we've also identified, because of all the flooding we've actually identified some sewer issues. Alderman Brown brought that up before as well. So, we're doing work in that road anyways. We might as well do the sewer as well. So the project scope is going to be expanding a little bit. We're going to be bringing another amendment to that for you as well. But we're also going to be working with Paul when we get to that point of phasing that traffic, because clearly we don't want to close Lewisburg Pike Dam for as long as we don't have to. But there will be some phasing part of that. So Hazen is the consultant. They've already started that design. The survey is already being done. They know the tight timeline, so we anticipate starting construction, bidding it next year. And so it's we're well aware of that timeline and the improvements that we're making of keeping everything within the scope in that timeline.
And we'll get a better sense. This is a cost that has been fairly bumped up with some inflationary
Fluid,
anticipation.
yeah.
But once we get the design work, we'll have a better fix too on costs. But we think this is a pretty good number. It could grow a little bit. We know we've still got some capacity overall in our allocation as well. And there'll be some other projects that we think will come our way in any of these categories. So this is where we are as of now. So, Mike, anything else you want to add?
I was going to say, where it was the report was the first upcoming step. There will be the second step that Christine mentioned, that in May of 2022, we can actually request the second half of our 9.2 allocation, 4.6 million. So we had gotten the first 4.6 million last May, so we're anticipating getting the next one here in a few days.
Okay, we've got, any other questions? We do need to try to get out of here by 6:30. So how about the proposed water and sewer impact fees? This is just a placeholder to see if there are any additional questions or comments or follow-up, so.
Michelle and Brian are not going to overwhelm you with PowerPoint slides.
I don't have a presentation this time.
No presentation. This is really just to give you some time if there's some specific questions you have or other information you'd like us to gather. We're looking to bring something forward to you near term to move forward with the update of the impact fees.
Go ahead.
I do. So I do have one quick. So this presupposes the Southeast plant, right? I mean, these fees it presupposes the Southeast plant.
Correct.
What happens hypothetically? Because and listen, this is not to debate the Southeast plant right now. We know what the charge of staff is, and we know, and that's what we've got right here before us. What happens if, hypothetically, 2 years down the road, we say alternative sewer, there's some different things that come up, but we have these fees, we just change them back, or do we, let's say it doesn't end up being the number, the cost for that. We're going to have a plant. But let's say it's 100 instead of the other figures. Does it matter that we vote for this now, presupposing that it's that number, or is this in effect saying, I think Alderman Peterson has mentioned, we haven't voted for it yet. But I'm trying to weigh that. What does this mean? We're just getting more fees now for whatever the future infrastructure might be? Or, because it was tied back to that plant number.
Right.
That's a long way of asking a question, I know. But I just want...
No, so what you're asking is that the number that was presented included all of the costs we're incurring at this moment, plus the proposed
Correct.
costs for a new facility as well. So one of the things we could do is we could look at a phasing approach, which is, I think, one thing we mentioned at the last meeting, in which we could, we could collect the cost of what we're incurring now or in the next 2 years until the board makes that decision, and then move on.
We certainly can. You've got to have some target to shoot for,
Yeah,
or
that's
you'll
right.
never collect against it. And this is really the best thinking we have based on the integrated plan and the development trends we have seen and that we have projected in terms of what you need. You need to add somewhere around 8 million gallons of additional treatment
Somewhere,
capacity somewhere, somehow. We feel that this is a pretty good planning number, but it's a planning number. Our experience thus far has been it typically costs a little more by the time you get there, but at least we've put a target out there that is reasonable based on best information at the time. And I really think that's about what you can do. We'll continue to refine it. We need to do a better job of keeping this refreshed, but we're in a stage where we can do that on a go-forward basis. So it's a good question. It's something we need to be mindful of, but you also got to set that target, and we feel like this is a pretty sound target to set.
And we continue to do studies to evaluate our fees.
Mhm.
So it is feasible that the fees could drop at some point in time if the hypothetical situation you're proposing.
Well, and this impact fee is designed to not place the burden on your ratepayers, but place the burden on development. So that's what we're trying to do here, so.
Alderman Brown?
Yeah, just real quickly, because I agree with the sentiment, but I also think we should be collecting as soon as we can all these new developments towards the number, because there is going to be a number. And the sooner we start collecting towards that, even if we eventually stop that, I think we need to be prepared for it so we don't have an even greater hike at a later date because we didn't prepare for it. So I would almost, and I know people chuckled when I said it last time, going ugly early to start working towards that, even if we have to come back at some point and make that change. I think that protects our citizens and it prepares us for what we may eventually need, even if that is an alternate source at some point. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Okay, this is a public notice of a special meeting. Oh, okay, in the system. Do we need to relog? Well- Do we have to sign in to it? Perfect. Do I need to call roll? May I do that now? Okay, I'm going to call the roll for this special meeting that we're getting ready to go into. Notice is hereby given, a special meeting of the City of Franklin Board of Mayor and Aldermen will be held on April 26, 2022. The special meeting will be held at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom of the, it's not actually the boardroom, it will be the,
You start here and end here.
yeah, okay. 109 3rd Avenue South, Franklin, Tennessee, for the following purpose, an executive session. So Alderman Baggett, are you here?
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Vice Mayor Blanton. Alderman Berger.
Here.
Alderman Hanson. Alderman Potts.
Present.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Barnhill. And the mayor's present too. I'll now entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion to move into executive session.
Appropriate motion.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Brown. Roll call vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Question, you don't want us to sign out of this meeting yet, correct?
Yeah, you can sign out.
There'll be a